June 19th, 1965.
Le Mans, 1966.
Dan Gurney, driving the #1 Ford Mark IV, has steadily moved through the pack. There's the checkered flag. It's an all-American win.
So the original GT40s are Ford's first real supercar. You know, with the street cars being essentially just race cars. Then they go on and they build the second iteration, which is the 05-06 Ford GT. And then what we have here, starting in 2016, is the third iteration of the Ford GT street car. So starting in 2016, Ford builds this car, a real supercar, an absolute weapon. 647 horsepower, 3.5 liter EcoBoost, a monster. They build 1,350 of these cars, fairly low production number, super valuable collector car. But again, Ford couldn't stop there, Multimatic couldn't stop there. They go on to build the Mark II, building 45 of these cars, a serious track-only car. So Ford and Multimatic take the street car and they develop that car. They put a whole ton more aero on this car. They give it about 50 more horsepower, bigger tires. So let's start talking about lap times here. And we'll use Mosport or Canadian Tire Motorsport Park as the track. One, because it's, you know, the home track at Multimatic, and two, because, well, it's my favorite track and it's an hour from here. So you take the street car and that thing will probably do about 1:20. Then the Mark II, the track-only car, totally beefed up, 50 more horsepower, probably do 1:14 around that track. That's really starting to haul the mail. But again, Ford and Multimatic couldn't help themselves. They weren't done. They had to go all out and build the Mark IV. So now when you're comparing the Mark IV to the Mark II or even the street car, we're in a whole different world here. You know, they threw away the rule book. A serious carbon tub, crazy amount of aero, carbon on carbon brakes. They took the EcoBoost, bored and stroked it. It's a 3.8 liter, and this thing clocks in at map 3 at 800 horsepower. So now comparing lap times, before I tell you any more about this car, again, the street car is probably gonna do about 1:20 at Mosport. This car is gonna do a 1:14. And then this thing would be at the front of the grid with any LMP2 car, probably coming in around 1:06 at Mosport. When you start to really compare the Mark II and the Mark IV, you realize just how serious this car is. Giant wheelbase, way more aero, the serious brakes, the serious slicks. Let's go sit in this thing. Yeah, you get in this car and you realize you are in a full, you know, prototype car. You can see the weave in the roof. You have the paddles here, the seating position, everything. This thing is ridiculous. So you've got some serious adjustment on this car. You've got your 3 different maps as far as horsepower goes. You got your 500 horsepower, your 600 horsepower, and then a serious jump to 800 horsepower. You got your 2 dials here. You've got a whole ton of settings for your ABS, and then your traction control, you know, starting at 1 full grip scenario up to 12, you know, where the car's really gonna save you, or like a torrential rain situation. And then same with your ABS. You've got 1 to 12, and then, you know, everything that a modern race car would have here on the steering wheel, and your pit speed limiter. You know, this thing is overkill for a track car. So the downforce on this car is just staggering. At 4,400 pounds of downforce at 200 miles an hour. And again, with 800 horsepower, you're certainly gonna reach that 200 miles an hour. The most cutting edge thing on this car that really puts it leaps and bounds above every other supercar on the planet is the ASV, the adaptive spool valve dampening suspension. They've got real-time accelerometers in this car that adjust the suspension on all four corners in real time as you go through the corner, as you start hitting the brakes. The suspension adjusts for your speed, your downforce. It adjusts for the 5 different map settings of the suspension. So it'll change the ride from fairly soft and smooth all the way to full pin, full race mode. This thing really is, if not one of the ultimate track cars. Door is probably 35 grams. And sitting in the Mark II, you open the door. Compared to the street car, you know, feels like a total race car. But then getting in the Mark IV, you get in that thing and you go, oh, okay, this is a race car. Step over all the aero. You get in here, you can see the full carbon tub. And, you know, the Mark IV, although it was a fully redesigned, brand new carbon tub, the safety capsule, if you will, is the same as this car, but then everything forward and everything back of it is completely reworked. These Ford track-only cars are already and going to be some of the most collectible cars on the planet. Looking at production numbers and performance, you got 45 of these Mark IIs being built, 67 of these Mark IVs being built. Very low production numbers by today's standards.
So years ago, when we were lucky enough to buy GT105, one of the 5 prototypes, one of the 3 remaining ones, and the only one kind of out there, the other 2 are in the Miller Museum, we got to race it, we got to enjoy it. We've done historic Le Mans, we've done Goodwood, we've done a bunch of things with it. It's probably one of my most favorite cars in the last 40 years. I just love the car. So when Ford came out with their modern version of a GT40, I thought, let's build ours. Let's see if we can get the same serial number, which we ended up getting GT105, the same as our original prototype. And Ford was kind enough to give us GT105 for this one. And we said, let's do it in the same livery as the prototype. So it was going to be the only one in this livery. So Ford said, geez, that's a pretty cool idea. And they ended up doing a heritage model kind of based on the livery, and they actually used the original prototype when they launched their heritage. Really cool. We did it in the same livery. We didn't actually put the numbers on because they changed around, and we did it with a blue interior, and it just turned out wonderfully, and we really enjoyed the car. And then when Ford came out with the Mark II, we said, let's do another prototype. Well, the first Mark II, the first 427 back in 1965, had this livery on it, and it happened to be serial number 106, one away from that car. Ken Miles took it to Daytona running 210 miles an hour. It was by far the fastest car on the track at the Le Mans trials. It was just, you know, the ultimate car until it broke at Le Mans in 1965. As you remember in the Ford versus Ferrari movie, they had problems with the transmission. Well, the original car, 106, was destroyed and there was nothing left. So to pay homage to that, we said, let's do the Mark II in the same thing, in the original Ford livery, the way the first Mark II was delivered. And again, we did it with the number 1, the way Ken Miles ran the car, same livery. It even has the Le Mans meatball, or mini meatball on the side here that they used at Le Mans. We did it as close as we could to the original, paying homage to it. 45 of these built in the world. Super cool car, super fast car. It's an unbelievable track car, and it makes the road car just look like it's pretty mundane. Then when Ford said, we're gonna build something that is just a spaceship, and they did exactly that, and they called it the Mark IV, and they took their cues from the original Mark IV, which was J1. J1 was tested by McLaren, and it had, again, the number 1 in the meatball. It had the same blue livery. It had Ford across the front of it. So we did it very much like the original car, the prototype of the Mark IVs, which then won Le Mans again in 1967. So the Mark IIs won in 66, the Mark IVs won in 67. And this one we took to a little bit of an extreme. We actually got chassis number 001. We got, in essence, the first one to do the prototype livery on. And again, when we did these cars, Ford said they would do no other cars with this livery. We also did a bunch of different things on it. We did all the graphics very similarly, but we added the gold coolers on it just the way the original car came. If you look in the interior, we had the seats done with the original GT40 eyelets, the famous eyelets for ventilation. We had the blue seat belts done the way the original J1 was done. We also had the exhaust done in blue the way the original J1 car was done. We got to take some liberties that Multimatic allowed us to say, okay, we'll do this, and we did a bunch of custom things. And again, because it's chassis 001, I think it was worthwhile doing. So ultimately, what we ended up doing is getting sort of the trilogy of modern GT40s, all done in the prototype livery. They're the only ones that are done in this livery, and together they make for a really cool package. I can't imagine if I could have went back in 1964, we're lucky enough to get the original prototype, but if you could have kept the original prototype of the Mark II and the original prototype of the Mark IV, what those cars would be worth today. It's kind of cool getting to put together a collection of modern GT40s.